Okay, everybody. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon. I try not to speak immediately after lunch too often. I'm a big science nerd, and this thing happens when you eat where your body breaks down nutrients and it raises your blood sugar, and then your pancreas releases insulin, and what comes with insulin is serotonin and melatonin, and these are things that make you drowsy, and drowsiness causes this thing called willpower depletion, which kind of makes you worse at making good decisions. So I just want to, as a warning in advance, if while I'm talking, you get the distinct sense that you're actually getting dumber as more time goes by, it's not what I'm saying. This is just science at work here while we're digging through the data. And I'm excited to dig through the data because it's basically what I am very lucky to do all day, every day at Magento in my capacity as the head of Magento BI. This is my contact info. I'll share it again at the end. But really, I'm responsible for the product line that was introduced last summer in and around allowing merchants to make smarter decisions using their data. And there's a little bit of an origin story here that I think is worth sharing, because one of the things that is so great about being at Magento right now is that now that we are, again, an independent company, we have all these opportunities to bring in great minds and great thinkers through acquisitions and through kind of new hiring and new strategy. And being able to be surrounded with people from those backgrounds really helps us get a more complex and robust view on the market and product strategy. And in my particular case, I was the CEO and co-founder of a company called RJ Metrics that Magento acquired last year. And at that company, we had a mission statement that was that our mission is to inspire and empower data-driven people. That's what we do all day, every day. And one thing that has been great about coming to Magento is that we've been able to continue living by that mission statement. The work that we do in the Magento BI team is really centered around actually making sure that we create more data-driven people out there and that those people have the tools they need to run their businesses in the best possible way. So this talk, by the way, is not a giant commercial for Magento BI. There's all kinds of good stuff in here. I'm going to get to some benchmarking data. I'm going to talk a little bit about the broader Magento roadmap. But one thing that I just want to start with so that everybody's clear is just to give you a sense of what Magento BI actually is, because it's really easy to get confused in the market in and around data and analytics in terms of what these different tools do. So there are really three different categories of tools when it comes to business intelligence. One of them is this idea of in-platform analytics. So if you think about going to the reporting page inside of Magento, or you log into your email service provider or your web host and you click on the reporting tab, you can get analytics. You can get some explanation of, you had this many visits, this many transactions, you sent this many emails. You go into Google Analytics and it tells you how many page views you had or what your bounce rate was. Those are in-platform analytics. And what is good about them is that they're easy to get to and you know what they're telling you. But what's challenging about them is that every single one of them is a data silo. Every single one of those tools is basically telling you about information that is inside of one blocked-in set of data, and it's not communicating with other data sources. There's another type of analytics, which is web analytics. Now, this is specifically things like Google Analytics, Segment, Mixpanel, anything where you're dropping a JavaScript tag on your site and you're capturing information about what's going on as people interact with your web pages. It's really an event capture process, and it's designed to pick up on signals around what's going on at the top of your funnel. But it's very, very specific to what can be observed in the browser. There's a lot of stuff that can't be observed in the browser. Things like people sending and opening emails, things like returns, things like your product catalog are not always readily available and knowable, mainly by having a JavaScript pixel there. Which brings me to business intelligence platforms, and that's what Magento BI is. Magento BI, the goal is to actually knock down those silos and allow data that's coming in from multiple sources to live inside of one centralized data warehouse. So you get this single source of the truth that's made up of all your primary sources of data, each of which may have their own in-platform analytics, but that allow you to learn more about what's going on inside your business. And I'll give you a few examples of that. But the reason that this is so important is because of what is going on out there in terms of the tools landscape available. There's infographics like these that show just how many of these data silos and third-party tools are out there that people can work with. And if you think this looks like a lot, I should share that this is actually the version of this infographic from 2011. I want to show you what last year's infographic looks like. That's the MarTech 5000. Every single logo on that slide is some kind of SaaS product or installed tool or other capability you can add that is going to be helping you run your business in some way, and every single one of those is a data silo, and every single one's got a reporting tab. But it really, over the course of this evolution, is where the value proposition for things like Magento BI have really come into their own, because knocking down those walls gives you a single point of the truth. So what we're doing inside the product is, number one, we're connecting. So obviously, the Magento backend database is our primary source of data. It's where we get started. It's the first thing that gets connected for every client. But that's not the only one. We connect to dozens and dozens of other platforms, and we actually partner with an open source framework called Singer to allow dozens, if not hundreds more of data sources to be connected to Magento BI so that we can pull in data from your ad networks, from your email service providers, from your customer feedback systems, from your CRM systems and your ERP systems. All of these connectors allow you to get that intelligence in one spot in Magento BI. Then once you've got that, you've really kind of got the keys to the city, because you can start to visualize, analyze, and go really deep on segmenting that data. And after you're in a place where you've got these initial visualizations and dashboards, the great thing is that you can iterate. You can double click and drill down. You can really explore what's going on inside of your data set without needing to go and download a bunch of data and throw it in Excel and build a pivot table. You can do it all inside of this interface. All right, I'll take that. So really, it's data infrastructure and dashboarding in one platform. And the front end is awesome. If you haven't had a chance to play around with it, there are a lot of ways to get in there for free. We have free trials on the Pro and Essentials tiers. And inside of those kind of out-of-the-box dashboards, this is where you start to get into some of these analyses that are really powerful. Marketing ROI, understanding really when your dollars go out, how many are you getting back, and how does that segment out by different sources, by different geographies, by different product categories. Customer lifetime value, which is really at the core of a lot of these analyses, going beyond the idea that what a customer is worth is what they make in that first conversion purchase, and actually understanding what's their chance of coming back and how much will they spend when they do. I'll share some benchmarking data in a minute about what some of that looks like for high-performing companies. All these other categories that really just provide this holistic picture of what's going on in your business, and also actionable intelligence. When you understand marketing ROI, you understand where to spend marketing dollars. When you understand customer lifetime value and you segment that out by product categories, you maybe understand how to merchandise in a way that is going to drive loyalty amongst your customers. So these are things that really add up and end up being very powerful. And the thing that I'm most excited that we've gotten to do since joining Magento is something that we were never able to do as an independent company back at RJ Metrics, which is come out with a product that only cost $100 a month. We had challenges at RJ because we were trying to serve every single platform on the planet, and the amount of customization involved in every single new implementation was just too much, and it made the product expensive. Knowing Magento, being inside of Magento, we have a setup now where we've got this offering called Magento BI Essentials, where you can get set up in about 5 minutes. You just need to connect to your data, and our system is able to intelligently understand what's going on in your database, build up an initial set of metadata understanding in the background, and then build out these best practices dashboards with 75 reports based on transaction data, customer data, web traffic data, takes in your Google Analytics. So it's really awesome stuff. And then when you want to get to that place where you're hooking up other data sources or you want to build your own charts, you can upgrade to Magento BI Pro, which starts at a very competitive rate for the BI industry. All right, so commercial time's over. I hope that was illuminating, and I would love to work with any of you that would be interested. If you're a merchant, we can work with you on getting set up. If you're a partner that is kind of working with merchants, we can help get your staff trained on what's going on inside the BI tool. And if you're a technology partner, we love your data. We'd love to make sure that we've got the right hooks into the backend data that lives in your system so that when people have your product, BI is more valuable, and when people have BI, your product is more valuable. So a lot of ways to partner with us on that. So let's talk a little bit about why we care about data so much. There's a bunch of different ways to slice this, but I actually worked in venture capital before starting RJ, and I always like to look at this from the venture capital standpoint because I think it tells a really interesting story about how the market and the money in the market is flowing and what people are thinking. And if you look at global e-commerce financing history, it's kind of bumpy. You have these big years where there are big surges in investing. Generally speaking, the trend is upward. There's a lot of dollars, absolute dollars, that are going into e-commerce investments. But this particular look at it is probably the most telling. Because if you look at these breakdowns, just look at this from the perspective of that dark blue, almost black bar, and the progression of that over time, and how the growth of that bar is squeezing down these other categories. Basically, that black bar and the gray bar above it represent late-stage investments. They represent big checks going into big, successful companies. And even though the number of dollars going into e-commerce is continuously growing, what's happening is that more and more and more of those dollars are going into the same small universe of companies. In other words, the venture capitalists have decided that the correct strategy in their portfolios is to back the winners that are already winners. And the number of bets that are getting made on early stage companies, on potential new investments in e-commerce or innovation in commerce are dwindling year by year as a result of that allocation in the portfolios going to these more successful businesses. So when we talk about winning and using data to win, what we're all really talking about is how do we get ourselves into that category? How do we become a company that has the metrics and the growth that are so attractive that we're actually commanding what is now more than half of the venture capital dollars that are flowing in? And this is where our benchmarking data comes in, because we can take data that's anonymized from a very, very large universe of merchants, and we can actually understand what the top performers really do look like. What are those companies that are actually performing the best? And I'll share a few charts here. We've got this concept that I'm going to introduce where we've basically got this population of anonymous merchants broken down into 4 quartiles. So the top quartile is the top 25%. Those are the people that in their first 36 months of existence get to the biggest spot in terms of their total gross merchandise value or revenue. So that orange line represents the top 25% of performers, and this is basically cumulative revenue in millions of dollars over the course of their first 3 years. And what you can already see here, and by the way, the other lines are quartiles 2, 3, and 4, look at how much of a runaway success that first quartile is. It's not that it's a little bit better than the next group. It's not that it's even twice as good as the next group. When you look at it on a compounding basis, you're talking about basically 5 to 6 times as much gross merchandise value that ends up getting created in those first 3 years by that top group. Being a winner isn't just about edging out the next group of folks. It is really a distinctly unique thing in terms of how you perform. When you look at this in terms of the quantity, the actual number of new customers, even just by the end of the second year here, the top performers are acquiring 5 times as many customers every single month than their average counterpart. So there's something going on in these companies that makes them really, really run away from the rest of the pack. And some of the things that matter a lot here that I want to focus on are actually in and around this idea of customer retention and getting customers to come back and buy again. Because what we see across our data is that for the typical online store, 68% of customers never come back and purchase a second time. That's slightly more than 2 out of 3 people that show up don't come back and buy again. And you can look at that data in this way as saying, what are the odds that they do come back? So the opposite of that 68% is 32%, which you see on that first bar there. But if you graph it out like this, it actually tells a really interesting story, which is basically when someone makes their first purchase, once they've done it, they've got a 32% chance of coming back and buy again. But once somebody has made their second purchase, they actually have a 53% chance of coming back and buying again. And once they've made their third purchase, they've got an even higher chance and an even higher chance of coming back and buying. Loyalty breeds loyalty in these situations, and it's highly predictable and measurable inside of your data. This is one of the charts we build for your data in Magento BI right out of the box to tell the story of basically how much it's worth to you to have somebody come back and buy again. Because it really does something to change the characteristics of the future behavior of the customer. The reason this is so important is because if you think about the 80-20 rule in this case, where kind of the conventional wisdom there, it's technically known as the Pareto Principle, 20% of a population is going to influence 80% of the results. We went and tested that against real data inside of our merchant population and basically found that there's some pretty powerful stuff here. The top 1% of customers at the average merchant represents 19% of the revenue they generate in any year. So if you wiped out 99 out of 100 of your customers, you'd still have 20 cents out of every dollar showing up. It's really, really amazing. And those numbers continue to be impressive all the way down. Basically, the top 10% of your customers represent effectively half of your revenue. So if you focused all your energy on the top performing 10%, then you could actually do 10% of the work and get 50% of the impact in terms of getting people to come back. And that really can tell a story about how you run your business. You have to understand who those people are and what their characteristics are, and you have to understand what things actually make them likely to come back and buy again. And those are two big categories that we dig into when we're talking about doing things in a business intelligence platform. So when we talk about why the data is important, this is it. This is the actionable operational intelligence that lets you focus your efforts on the right part of your population. And again, even all the way at the end there, the top half of your customer base, that's 84% of the revenue. Another way to put it is the bottom half is only 16% of your business. It's a pretty remarkable thing. And we see this so consistently. This obviously is on average across merchants, but you pull any individual merchant and you see something that looks very, very similar here. There's not a ton of volatility. And what if we frame that repeat purchase kind of framework around understanding the difference between these different quartiles, right? So what's going on in these top performing businesses? And if you take a look at this chart, I think this is the last super confusing chart I have for you. This is a graph where the two lines always add up to 100%. They're both a percentage. So the orange line on the bottom there is the percentage of revenue in any given month that's coming in from your repeat purchasers. And the blue line on top is the percentage that is coming in from first-time purchasers. The reason they add up to 100 always is because new plus first-time is everybody. So in any given month, you add up those two lines, it's 100. And this is the graph of, over time, basically what happens inside of the average company that's not a top performer. So this is what's going on inside of your typical quartiles 2 through 4 companies. And it's actually a really remarkable thing where these two lines converge fairly rapidly. By about the 14, 15-month mark, about 50% of revenue is coming from new customers, about 50% of revenue is coming from repeats, and it kind of stabilizes around there. This is what it looks like for the top performers. And I want to highlight a couple of things here because I think it's really, really important. Again, going back to why these repeat purchasers matter so much to being a top performer. Because first of all, if you look at even just the very first data point, you're seeing here that 20% of revenue in the first month is coming from repeat purchasers. Now that doesn't even seem to make any sense, right? Because you're a brand new store, it is your first month online. How can 20% of your revenue be from repeats if there's nobody to make a repeat? We asked the same question, and when we dug into the data, what we found was these stores have people coming back to buy multiple times so rapidly in their life cycle, in the very first month of their existence, that they're showing up in both of the lines in month 1. Their first purchase is showing up in the new category, and their second, third, fourth, if they happen, are showing up in the repeat category. And there's enough of them that even by month 1, you're talking about 1 out of 5 purchases is from a repeat. This is a big deal. The other thing that's really fascinating is that these lines kind of cross each other. There's a little convergence at the end as it gets a little noisy, but you see it around the mark where in the other quartiles, the two lines converge, and it's a 50-50 split. By this halfway mark here, you actually have more revenue coming in from repeat purchasers than you do from new purchasers. And remember that these are the same exact people that were acquiring 5 times as many new purchasers as their counterparts in the other quartiles. So despite the fact that they're getting so many new, the repeat engine is kept alive. And the ability to keep people coming back is really focused on. So I think I've made my point here that repeat purchasers really, really matter. But one of the things that's really exciting to do is put your own data in these charts. And this is exactly what you do in Magento BI. You plug your own data and you're going to see these numbers and you'll see what it looks like. And you might find opportunities to do more to bring back your repeat purchase base. So the final points that I want to talk about here are a little bit more broadly scoped to Magento and Magento's roadmap in total. I'm really lucky to work on the strategy and growth team at Magento. which is really kind of a cross-functional team that spans work with the product group, work with the go-to-market group, kind of work with mergers and acquisitions. And from that perspective, I just get to see a lot of what's going on in terms of the strategic planning for Magento. And I want to talk about some things that from my perspective and the perspective of my colleagues on the product marketing team, are really front and center in terms of what Magento's working on right now and putting a lot of energy into. Obviously, B2B is absolutely huge. With the recent release of Magento 2.2, we have ranked as a top-performing leader in a recent Forrester B2B study. The performance and quality of this B2B code is really awesome, and I think we've got some amazing case studies already, but for anybody that's got B2B capabilities or can basically, potentially experiment with B2B capabilities for their own business. If you're on 2.2, this B2B code is there, and it's something that's available and I think very much worth exploring. We've also got some really interesting things coming in as a result of partnerships. So we're working very closely with Google. There was an announcement fairly recently on that front to be collaborative with them around this idea of progressive web apps. And these are apps where you've got the ability to be preloading content, to have a somewhat native app-like experience inside of the browser when you are experiencing a site on a mobile phone. It's really Google's answer to what comes next after responsive web design in terms of building for mobile without sacrificing the desktop experience. We are working on some really great functionality around enabling PWA more natively inside of Magento and the work that gets done on the front end of Magento sites. Expect a lot more news on that, but some really exciting work there, and it's really cool to be working so closely with Google on that. Sales channels. So we saw the acquisition last year of a product line that we call Magento Social, which is something that basically allows you to push your products out through Facebook. This is really, if you think about it more broadly, the first step in a particular direction for Magento around enabling our merchants to be selling through as many valuable channels as possible. And I'm not going to name any names today, but there's a lot of really important work going on across the organization to identify where and how we can build and release technology that helps merchants get their product feeds into the right places and do it in a way that is natively integrated with Magento such that we can really create a ton of value without needing to have merchants jump through hoops or do custom work. Content management is a big focus. As always, the acquisition of Bluefoot and getting that out into core is a big priority. And then there's this area that I get really excited about and I want to talk a little bit more about, which is improving the universe of predictive analytics and artificial intelligence. And I have a slide just dedicated to this because when you think about Magento Business Intelligence as a platform, obviously there's a lot of work that you can do in looking at your data in the past. A lot of these charts that I showed you today, that was really all analysis that you do on what has happened before. But when you think about what Magento BI enables, you get into a place where you've got two things at the same exact time. One is that you've consolidated data in a way that is really predictably structured. So from merchant to merchant to merchant, now we're in a place where data, while it may be very unique to each business model, looks and feels and is understood programmatically in a very predictable, similar way. And then we also have the benefit of that solution being hosted on Amazon Redshift in AWS, which means that we have this cloud-based solution where we have a whole lot of flexibility, a whole lot of scalability, and a whole lot of power around how we deliver it. When you combine those two things, it is actually a really, really ripe training ground for building machine learning models and assembling training data for machine learning models, and really starting to create AI-driven insights at multiple touch points inside of the product. So this is somewhat forward-looking, but a lot of the work that we're really starting to go down the road with in the business intelligence roadmap is to start to talk about how can we actually incorporate into Magento BI's dashboards, into eventually the Magento admin panel, and into API endpoints that people can pull from for their own products, some sense of predictivity. What's going to happen in the future, and what are the things that might actually trigger the behaviors that are desirable of the merchants that are visiting our sites. So the categories that this spans are vast. Obviously, personalization is a really big deal in this area. Being able to forecast revenue, product recommendations, intelligent customer segmentation. These may sound like things that seem so far away, But in reality, the pieces that are needed to actually start to make some really interesting progress here are coming into place in a really fascinating way. So there's a lot of really interesting kind of early stage work going on this, and I'm really happy to share some insights into that. But when you tie it all together, like we love to do in these product presentations, you really just end up with in a situation where you've got this leading cloud suite for commerce. And it's the combination of these tools. It's having commerce order management, BI, the marketplace, continuing to add in the sales channels as we discussed, our work in shipping, and all of the support systems and infrastructure around it that powers these things that really make us extremely proud of where Magento is and kind of how it's developing into what really is the leading suite out there. So we allow people to get to market faster, to innovate really continuously, and of course to scale. And that's really what a lot of this cloud work is about, is being able to scale in a way that is both from a technical standpoint and from an internationalization and globalization standpoint. So anyway, I could talk about this stuff all day, and that's why my email is up here, because I'd love to chat with any of you. If you have questions, if you want to follow up on anything, would love to do that. And you can always visit Magento.com if you want to sign up for Magento BI, because you can go right on the site, click through to Essentials, and sign right up. There's no need to talk to a salesperson or anything. So that is my story. I really appreciate you all taking the time to be here. I don't think I saw anybody fall asleep, and I appreciate that as well. And you can find me at networking if you want to chat some more. But thanks, everybody.